The desert night was quiet, too quiet for Darren's liking. He walked across the dunes with his rifle on his back, his boots sinking into the soft sand. The stars above shone brighter here than anywhere else he had ever been. The outpost where he was stationed stood far behind him, a cluster of dull metal buildings half buried in sand. He had been sent to patrol the area for signs of smugglers. It was a boring job, most nights. Nothing ever happened. Just the same sand, the same wind, the same silence. But tonight, as Darren moved further away from the outpost, he noticed something strange in the distance. A faint glow flickered between the dunes. At first, he thought it was a reflection, maybe light bouncing from a crashed drone. But the glow didn't fade, it pulsed like it was alive. Darren crouched low, careful not to make a sound. He slowly made his way toward the light. As he climbed a dune and looked down, his eyes widened. There, half buried in the sand, was a broken alien ship. Its metal hull was twisted, black smoke rising from its cracks. Strange symbols glowed faintly across the surface. It didn't look like any smuggler craft he had ever seen. This was something else. Something far older and far more advanced. Darren's heart raced. His orders were clear: if he found anything unusual, he was supposed to report it. But curiosity pulled him closer. He slid down the dune, landing softly near the wreck. The glowing came from inside the broken ship. Darren climbed carefully over the wreckage, ducking under sharp beams of alien metal. Inside, the air was heavy and smelled of burnt wires. Sparks crackled from shattered panels. But what caught his attention was not the damage, it was the figure lying in the center of the ship. She was wrapped in glowing silk-like strands that shimmered in the darkness. The fabric looked alive, shifting and pulsing with soft light. Her skin was pale silver, her eyes closed as if she were sleeping. Darren froze. She wasn't human. He could see that clearly from the shape of her face, her long hair that sparkled like threads of light, and the faint glow of her skin. Yet she looked fragile, almost peaceful, like she didn't belong in this wreckage. Suddenly, her eyes opened. They were bright, like two small stars. She looked at him, frightened at first, then calm, as if she realized he wasn't an enemy. "Who are you?" Her voice was weak, but clear. Darren hesitated. He had never spoken to an alien before. "My name is Darren. I'm a soldier, stationed nearby. Are you hurt?" Her lips trembled. "My name? Nira. My ship, destroyed. I need safe place." She tried to rise, but the silk strands around her glowed brighter, holding her down gently, as if protecting her. Darren didn't understand how it worked, but he could see she was weak. "You should not be here," she whispered. "Hunters will come. They want me." Darren frowned. "Hunters?" She nodded slowly. "Mercenaries. They destroyed my ship. They will search the desert until they find me." For a long moment, Darren stood still. His training told him to call his commander right now, report the wreck, and wait for orders. But when he looked at Nira, lying there helpless, something in him resisted. If he called the base, the officers would lock her away. They would question her, maybe worse. She didn't look like a threat. She looked like someone who needed help. Darren took a deep breath. "I can't leave you here. You won't survive the night." Nira's eyes softened. The silk around her loosened slightly, as if it trusted him too. With careful hands, Darren lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, the silk wrapping her like a cloak. As he carried her out of the wreckage, the glowing strands shimmered in the dark, making them easy to spot. He pulled his coat around her, hiding the light as best as he could. The wind picked up, carrying sand across the desert. Darren struggled back up the dune, his heart pounding. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every sound of shifting sand made him fear the mercenaries she spoke of were already near. But they reached the ridge safely, the outpost lights faint in the distance. Darren adjusted his grip on her and whispered, "Don't worry. I'll keep you safe." Nira closed her eyes, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. The silk glowed faintly under his coat, like a heartbeat. Darren knew this was the beginning of something dangerous. By helping her, he was breaking every rule he had sworn to follow. But deep down, he felt this choice was the right one. As the desert night stretched around them, he carried her toward the outpost, unaware of how much his life was about to change. Darren slipped quietly into the outpost just before dawn. The guards at the gate barely looked at him, most were tired from the night shift. He kept his coat wrapped tightly around Nira, who remained still in his arms. Anyone glancing at him would think he carried supplies or damaged equipment. Inside, Darren hurried to his small quarters. The room was simple, just a narrow bed, a desk with scattered tools, and a locker for his gear. It was not much, but at least it was private. He placed Nira gently on the bed. The silk around her shimmered faintly in the dim light. It spread across the sheets like living fabric, curling and adjusting as if it wanted to make her comfortable. Darren had never seen anything like it. Nira opened her eyes slowly. She looked around the room, her expression soft but cautious. "This place, safe?" she asked in her gentle voice. Darren nodded. "Safe enough. But no one can know you're here. If the officers find you, I can't protect you." Her gaze lowered. She seemed to understand. The silk dimmed slightly, blending into the shadows of the room. Darren pulled a blanket over her to hide the glow. He sat on the edge of the desk, rubbing his face. His mind spun with questions. Who was she really? Why were mercenaries chasing her? And what was that strange silk that moved on its own? Before he could ask, Nira spoke. "You risk much for me." "Why?" Darren looked at her. "Because you were alone. Because you were in danger. I couldn't leave you there." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Nira smiled faintly. It was small, almost hidden, but it carried warmth. She touched the silk at her arm. "This is not cloth. It is part of me. My people are born with it. We call it the star silk. It keeps us warm, heals wounds, protects when danger comes." Darren leaned forward, curious. "It's alive?" She nodded. "Yes. It listens to my heart. It feels what I feel." Darren stared at the strands where they rested across the blanket. They pulsed faintly, almost like breathing. He reached a hand toward them, but stopped, unsure if he should. Nira noticed. Her eyes softened. "It will not hurt you. Try." Carefully, Darren touched the silk with his fingertips. To his surprise, it wasn't rough like fabric or soft like cotton. It felt warm, almost like touching skin. The strands curled slightly around his hand, glowing brighter. He pulled back quickly. It reacted. "Yes," Nira whispered. "It senses kindness." Before Darren could ask more, a loud knock shook the door. His heart jumped. He quickly pulled the blanket fully over her, hiding her from view. "Darren," a voice called. It was Runo, another soldier. "You're late for the morning check. Open up." Darren forced his voice to stay calm. "I'm coming." He glanced at Nira, who lay still under the blanket, the silk dimming until no glow showed. Then he opened the door just a crack. Runo stood there with a grin. "Still sleeping, huh? Thought you went missing last night." "Patrol took longer," Darren said quickly. "Nothing out there but sand." Runo shrugged. "Figures. This desert's dead. Come on, breakfast is ready." "I'll join later," Darren replied. "Need to clean my gear first." Runo nodded and walked away, whistling. Darren shut the door and leaned against it, his chest heavy with relief. He turned back to Nira. She had already uncovered her face, her eyes calm. "You hide me well," she said softly. Darren gave a weak smile. "Let's hope my luck holds." The day passed slowly. Darren stayed close to his quarters, bringing food quietly and making sure no one entered. Nira ate little, but her strength began to return. Sometimes the silk glowed softly at night, filling the room with a peaceful light. As the hours passed, Darren asked questions, and Nira answered when she could. She told him she was from a world far beyond the known roots, a place hidden in the folds of space. Her people were not warriors but keepers of knowledge. "The mercenaries," she explained, "want me because of my birth. I am princess, heir of my people. If they take me, they control much more than me. They control secrets that should never be theirs." Darren listened in silence. The thought of mercenaries chasing her across the galaxy made his blood tighten. She wasn't just any traveler, she was important, maybe more than he understood. That night, as the desert winds howled outside, Darren sat by the small window. Nira lay on the bed, the silk around her glowing like moonlight. "Hunters will come," she whispered again, her voice carrying worry. "They will not stop." Darren turned to her, his eyes steady. "Then we'll be ready. You're not alone anymore." Her gaze lingered on him. For the first time since they met, she seemed to relax fully. The silk brightened, wrapping her gently, filling the small room with a warm glow. Darren knew he had just tied his fate to hers. Whatever storm was coming, it would reach them soon. But as he watched the glow of the silk in the dark, he felt strangely calm. Something about it gave him courage he had never known before. The desert was quiet during the day, but by evening the silence changed. The radios in the outpost picked up faint signals, strange frequencies that did not belong to any human patrol. The officers dismissed it as smugglers passing through, but Darren felt a cold weight in his chest. He knew better. Inside his quarters, he sat across from Nira. She was stronger now, though the silk still wrapped around her like living armor. Its glow had dimmed in daylight but returned when shadows filled the room. "They are close," Nira said softly, her eyes distant as if she could sense them. "The hunters. I feel them." Darren frowned. "How?" "The silk remembers danger. It warns me." She touched the glowing strands gently. "It carries the memory of fear." Darren stood and began pacing. He didn't doubt her. The strange signals matched her warning too well. If mercenaries were really here, the outpost was blind to the threat. And if they discovered Nira? He stopped and faced her. "We can't stay here much longer. If they come and find you, I can't protect you inside these walls." Nira's eyes searched his. "But where will we go?" "The desert," Darren said firmly. "It's open, but we can move without being seen. I know the canyons, places where scanners don't reach." Nira hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I will trust you." Before they could plan further, another knock rattled the door. This time it wasn't Runo's friendly voice, it was the sharp tone of Commander Brandt. "Soldier Darren. Report immediately. Signals in the east sector. I want every man ready." Darren froze. His commander rarely came to the lower quarters himself. He glanced at Nira, who pulled the silk tightly around her, dimming it to almost nothing. She slid off the bed and hid against the wall behind the desk. Darren opened the door halfway. "Yes, Commander." Brandt's stern eyes scanned the room behind him but saw nothing. "You were on patrol last night. Did you see anything unusual?" Darren kept his voice steady. "Nothing but wreckage from old smuggler drones. Desert was empty." Brandt narrowed his eyes. "Strange. Our scanners picked up faint trails, not smuggler patterns." almost military. If you know something, soldier, speak now. Darren swallowed hard. I don't, sir. The commander studied him for another moment before nodding. Be ready at nightfall. We may have company. Then he turned and left. Darren shut the door quickly. He leaned against it, his chest tight. He had lied directly to his commander. If they found out, he'd face punishment worse than dismissal. But when he looked at Nira, still hidden in the shadows, he knew he would lie again if it meant keeping her safe. That night, alarms echoed across the outpost. The signals grew stronger, unidentified ships moving close to the desert. Soldiers rushed to defensive posts, rifles ready. Darren joined them briefly to avoid suspicion, scanning the horizon with the others. Flashes of light appeared in the distance, like stars falling to the sand. Dropships. Mercenaries, someone muttered. The officers barked orders, but the soldiers were nervous. They had fought smugglers before, never organized mercenary squads. Darren's thoughts raced. If the mercenaries broke through, they would search the outpost. Nero would be trapped. He needed to get to her before that happened. When the commander sent him to check the western side, Darren slipped away. He returned to his quarters, where Nero waited, her eyes wide. They are here, she whispered. I know. Darren grabbed a pack from his locker and stuffed it with food, water, and extra power cells. We're leaving now. Nira stood, the silk shifting around her like flowing light. The desert is wide. How can we escape them? We don't need to escape, Darren said. We just need to stay ahead long enough. I know paths they won't. Before they left, Nira touched his arm. If they catch us, it will not only be my life they take. My people carry secrets in the silk. The mercenaries want that. They will use it to harm many. Darren met her gaze, steady and firm. Then they won't catch us. They slipped out under the cover of night. Alarms and shouts filled the outpost as soldiers rushed to fight the invaders. The chaos gave Darren and Nira their chance. They moved quickly across the sand, heading toward the dark ridges in the distance. The desert wind howled, carrying the sound of engines overhead. Dropships circled like predators searching for prey. Darren kept low, guiding Nira into the deeper shadows. As they crossed the dunes, Nira stumbled. The silk flared briefly to support her, hardening like armor before softening again. Darren caught her by the arm. You all right? Yes, she breathed, but the silk grows weak when I am afraid. Then stay close to me, Darren said. We'll keep moving. Behind them, bright lights swept across the sand as mercenaries deployed. Their voices echoed in harsh tones, searching, hunting. Nira's silk pulsed nervously, casting faint light, but Darren pulled her close beneath his coat. Quiet, he whispered. The searchers passed not far from them. Darren's heart pounded as he held his breath. Only when the lights moved away did he exhale slowly. They continued deeper into the desert, heading for the canyons where scanners could not follow. The mercenaries were close, too close. Darren knew this was only the beginning. The hunt had started, and both of their lives now depended on staying one step ahead. The desert stretched endlessly before them, silver under the starlight. Darren moved quickly across the sand, guiding Nira toward the distant canyons. The wind blew strong, carrying the sound of engines and shouting behind them. The mercenaries were close. Nira's silk glowed faintly under Darren's coat, pulsing with her heartbeat. She tried to walk with steady steps, but the long night and her weakened state slowed her. Still, she did not complain. She followed Darren, trusting him to lead. Keep moving, Darren whispered. Once we reach the canyons, we'll be harder to find. Behind them, lights swept across the dunes. Dropships circled like hunting birds, their beams of light searching the sand. Every time one passed overhead, Darren pressed nearer down into the shadows of the dunes, waiting until the danger passed. Hours felt like days. The desert air grew colder, sharp against the skin. Nira's silk spread slightly around them, warming the air with a soft glow. Darren glanced at her. That silk, it protects us even from the cold. Yes, she whispered. It remembers the warmth of my people. It shares it with those I trust. The words struck him. The silk was not only her shield but also a sign of faith. She trusted him, and the silk showed it. By dawn, they reached the edge of the canyon's tall walls of stone carved by time, stretching like a maze. Darren led Nira inside, their steps echoing against the stone. Here the air was cooler, and the high walls blocked the scanning lights above. This place is safe for now, Darren said, his voice low. Scanners won't reach us here. But we must keep moving deeper. They walked through narrow paths, the canyon twisting and splitting into many routes. Darren knew the area from old patrols. Smugglers once used these paths to hide. Now, he hoped they would serve the same purpose. As they moved, Nira spoke softly. My people have a tradition. On nights when danger came, warriors wrapped their companions in silk and swore to guard them until dawn. They called it the Night of Silk. It was a vow of trust. Darren looked at her, curious. And you gave me that trust already? Her eyes met his, calm and steady. Yes. You carried me from the wreck, and you hide me still. The silk knows your heart. Darren didn't know how to answer. He had never thought of himself as a protector of princesses or keepers of vows. He was just a soldier, one among many. But her words carried weight, and for the first time, he felt that his actions meant more than survival, they meant honor. Their quiet moment ended when a sudden noise echoed through the canyon. A blast of energy struck the wall near them, sending sparks and dust into the air. Down! Darren shouted, pulling Nira behind a rock. Voices echoed above. Mercenaries had found their trail. They fired again, beams of light cutting across the stone. Nira gasped, her silk flaring bright. As another shot came, the silk hardened around her like a shield. The blast struck, but instead of burning her, it scattered like light on water. Darren stared in shock. It stopped the blast, Nira winced but nodded. For a short time, yes. But the silk weakens when I am afraid. Darren gritted his teeth. He leaned out from cover and fired his rifle at the ledge above. The mercenaries ducked back, giving them a moment to run deeper into the canyon. Come on, he urged. They ran through twisting paths, dust rising around them. The mercenaries followed, their shouts echoing closer and closer. The canyon became a maze of sharp turns and narrow corridors. At one point, Nira stumbled, nearly falling. Darren caught her arm, pulling her up. She looked at him, breathing hard. You could leave me, and escape. Not a chance, Darren said firmly. We finish this together. Her silk glowed brighter, as if responding to his words. They reached a wider chamber in the canyon, where the walls rose high above. The moonlight poured down through the gap. It was beautiful for a moment, but danger followed close behind. The mercenaries entered from the other side, their weapons ready. Darren raised his rifle. Stay behind me. The fight was quick but fierce. Energy blasts struck the stone, filling the chamber with sparks. Darren moved with sharp focus, firing back, forcing the enemy to take cover. But there were too many, and their weapons were stronger. As one mercenary aimed directly at Darren, Nira stepped forward. The silk wrapped around him suddenly, forming a glowing shield. The blast struck, but the silk absorbed it, shimmering like liquid light. Darren looked at her in shock. She had shared her protection with him. Nira's voice was steady. The silk guards those bound by trust. You are not alone. With renewed strength, Darren fired again, driving the mercenaries back. When more arrived, he threw a charge at the canyon wall. The blast shook the chamber, sending rocks crashing down, sealing the passage behind them. Dust filled the air, but silence followed. They had escaped for now. Breathing hard, Darren turned to Nira. That was too close. She nodded, her face pale but determined. The hunters will not stop. They will follow us, again and again. Darren looked at her, his jaw set. Then we'll stay ahead. We'll fight if we must. But I won't let them take you. For a long moment, they stood together in the moonlight pouring through the canyon's gap. The silk around Nira glowed softly, wrapping them both in light. The night of silk, she had called it. A vow of trust. And now, Darren realized, that vow was truly theirs. The canyon was silent again after the fight. Darren and Nira rested near a tall rock, the sand cool beneath them. Nira's silk dimmed, no longer glowing as bright. She leaned against the stone, breathing slowly. You used much of your strength, Darren said quietly. The silk grows weaker when I give too much, Nira whispered. But it will return, if I rest. Darren nodded. He kept watch, his rifle across his knees. His mind, however, wasn't calm. The mercenaries had known where to find them. They hadn't simply guessed their path. Someone must have told them. He thought back to the outpost, to the commander's sharp eyes, to Rano's casual questions. Could someone there have betrayed him? The thought made his stomach tighten. By morning, they moved again, deeper into the desert canyons. The wind carried faint sounds, distant engines, heavy boots on sand. The mercenaries hadn't given up. They were regrouping, and they would strike again soon. Darren knew they couldn't run forever. They needed food, water, and a safe place to hide. The only source of supplies was the outpost they had left behind. We'll have to go back, Darren said finally. Nira looked at him with worry. Is it wise? If there is betrayal, they will find us faster. I don't like it either, Darren admitted. But without supplies, we won't last long. If we're careful, we can slip in and out before anyone knows. Nira lowered her head in thought, then gave a small nod. I trust you. That evening, under the cover of darkness, they returned toward the outpost. From a ridge, Darren looked down at the cluster of buildings. Soldiers moved about, patrols circling the walls. The place looked normal, but Darren knew better. Somewhere inside, someone was passing information to the mercenaries. They slipped into the shadows, moving along the edge of the wall. Darren knew a side entrance where supplies were often brought in. It wasn't guarded tightly. They reached it without being seen, and Darren pried it open. Inside, the storage hall smelled of metal and old rations. Darren filled a small pack with food, water, and medicine. Nira stood quietly, her silk dim and hidden under his coat. For a moment, it seemed the plan was working. But then a voice spoke from the shadows. I knew you were hiding something, Darren. He spun around, rifle ready. Rano stepped into the light, a smug smile on his face. His weapon was pointed at them. Rano, Darren muttered. It was you. Yes, Rano said calmly. The mercenaries pay well for information. And when I told them about strange signals, they believed me. But you, he shook his head, you went too far. You're protecting her. Nira's eyes narrowed, the silk tightening around her. You betrayed your own people. Rano laughed coldly. People? The officers don't care about us. To them we're tools, nothing more. At least the mercenaries reward loyalty. Darren gritted his teeth. That's not loyalty. That's greed. Before Rano could fire, Darren moved. The two clashed, weapons striking. The room echoed with the sound of struggle. Darren's rifle hit the ground, and Rano pressed forward with his blade. Nira raised her hand. The silk leapt from her arm, wrapping around Runo's wrist. He froze as the glowing strands tightened, forcing him back. His weapon clattered to the floor. What is this?" he shouted in panic. "The silk knows truth," Nira said firmly. "It sees your betrayal." With a flick of her hand, the silk shoved him aside, slamming him against the wall. He crumpled, stunned but alive. Darren picked up his rifle again. His chest heaved, not from fear but from anger. He had trusted Runo once, fought beside him on long patrols. The betrayal cut deeper than he wanted to admit. "We can't stay," Darren said, turning to Nira. "The moment he wakes, he'll call the mercenaries." Nira nodded. Together, they slipped out of the storage hall, leaving Runo behind. They crossed the outpost quietly and escaped into the desert once more, supplies on Darren's back. The night air was colder now, sharp against their skin. Nira's silk spread around them, warming the chill. Yet its glow carried a faint sadness, as if it had felt the betrayal too. Darren broke the silence. "He was one of us. We trusted him. And he sold us out." Nira's voice was calm but steady. "Betrayal often comes from those closest. It is painful, but it shows us who truly stands with us." Darren looked at her. The silk wrapped around her shimmered softly in the starlight. "Then I'll stand with you. No matter what." Her eyes met his, filled with quiet strength. "And I with you." Behind them, lights flared in the outpost. Alarms began to sound. Runo must have woken. Soon the mercenaries would know exactly where they were heading. Darren tightened the straps of his pack. "Then let them come. We'll face them together." The desert stretched wide before them once again, the stars shining above. The vow of silk bound them now more than ever, even in the shadow of betrayal. The desert night carried the sound of alarms from the outpost. Red lights flickered in the distance like angry eyes. Darren and Nira moved quickly, their steps quiet on the sand. The supplies weighed heavy on Darren's back, but the heavier weight was the truth: they had been betrayed. "Runo will not stop," Nira said softly. "He will tell them everything." "I know," Darren answered. His voice was steady, but his mind was sharp with worry. "They'll chase us until they catch us, or until we end this." The desert stretched endlessly, but Darren led them toward the old cliffs ahead. He had seen them once on a patrol. The place was dangerous, filled with caves and narrow paths, but it also offered cover. They could hide, at least for a little while. When they reached the cliffs, the stars were fading and dawn touched the horizon. The rocks glowed faintly with the first light. They found a small cave and slipped inside. The air was cool and dry. Darren set the supplies down while Nira sat against the stone wall. Her silk dimmed until it was almost invisible. "You need rest," Darren said. Nira shook her head. "Rest will not be enough. The silk weakens because it is still bound." "Bound?" Darren asked. Nira raised her hand, showing a faint silver mark across her wrist where the silk threads met. "Long ago, my people locked away part of the silk's power. They feared it would draw enemies. Only when silk joins with a true bond can it be freed again." Darren frowned. "A true bond?" Nira's eyes met his. "Trust. Will. A promise stronger than fear." Darren was silent for a long moment. He thought about their nights in the desert, their battles, their vows. He had promised her safety, and she had given him her trust. Maybe that was the bond she meant. Before he could speak, a rumble echoed outside. The ground shook faintly. Darren grabbed his rifle and moved to the cave's entrance. Engines. Vehicles. Voices. The mercenaries had found them. Dozens of lights spread across the desert below. Armed men climbed the cliffs, their weapons flashing in the sunlight. "They're here," Darren said, steady but tense. Nira stood. The silk around her flickered weakly. She placed a hand on his arm. We cannot fight them as we are. But if you will, trust me, then I will open the bond. Darren looked at her. The enemy climbed closer with every second. He didn't hesitate. Do it. Nira stepped closer. The silk spread from her wrist, soft and glowing, wrapping gently around Darren's arm. At first, it was only light and warmth. Then it sank deeper, like fire moving through his blood. His vision blurred. For a heartbeat, he felt as though the desert itself was breathing with him. When his sight cleared, the silk was glowing brighter than ever, threads of silver wrapping both of them together. The light pulsed with their heartbeat, one rhythm, not two. This is the bond, Nero whispered. Now the silk will answer us both. The mercenaries reached the cave mouth, shouting as they raised their weapons. Darren lifted his rifle. The silk moved with him, flowing along the barrel, wrapping the weapon in glowing strands. When he fired, the bullets blazed with light, striking the cliff walls with thunder. Rocks shattered, blocking part of the path. Nira raised her arms, and silk leapt outward like living rivers. It caught the nearest mercenaries, pulling them back, binding their weapons, throwing them aside. Together, they fought as one. The silk shielded Darren when shots came close. It sharpened his aim, steadied his breath. When he moved, Nira's silk followed, striking where he could not. The mercenaries who had once outnumbered them now struggled against a force they could not understand. Panic spread through their ranks. Fall back, one of them shouted. But Darren didn't let them retreat easily. He stepped forward, his voice carrying across the rocks. You won't take her. Not now, not ever. The silk pulsed brighter, as if answering his words. The mercenaries stumbled back, fear in their eyes. They had expected prey, not power. Soon, the desert fell silent again. The survivors fled, their engines fading into the distance. The cliffs were scattered with broken weapons and empty footprints. Darren lowered his rifle slowly. The silk around it faded back into a soft glow. He turned to Nira. She was breathing hard, but her eyes shone. You see, she said, her voice trembling with both exhaustion and pride. The bond is real. Darren gave a small smile. I feel it. Like the silk listens now. Like it's part of me too. It is, Nira whispered. Your will feeds it. And with both our wills together, it will only grow stronger. Outside, the first rays of morning touched the desert. The rocks glowed gold, and the silk shimmered like dawn itself. But Darren knew this was only the beginning. The mercenaries had been beaten, but not destroyed. And Runno would not give up. Still, for the first time, he felt no fear. With the bond awakened, they were no longer running alone. He looked at Nira, her silk wrapping gently around his arm. Let them come again, he said quietly. We'll be ready. Nira nodded. Together. The desert wind carried their vow as the sun rose higher, marking the start of a new day and the true awakening of the nights in silk. The desert stretched endlessly, gold under the rising sun. Darren and Nira had spent the morning moving through the canyons, carefully avoiding the outpost below. Their supplies were enough for the day, but they knew Runno would not rest. He had been defeated once, but mercenaries never forgot. Darren adjusted the pack on his back and glanced at Nira. Her silk shimmered softly, like threads of starlight woven around her. We can't keep running forever, he said. I know, Nira replied. But the bond gives us power. We are not alone anymore. We can face them if we must. They reached a high ridge that overlooked the desert. From here, they could see the outpost in the distance, a small cluster of buildings against the sand. And on the horizon, a glint of movement, a small formation of vehicles moving toward them. It's them, Darren said quietly. Runno's back. Nira's silk flared brightly, sensing the threat. She took a deep breath. We face him here. There is no other way. Darren nodded, gripping his rifle. Together, they moved down the ridge toward a narrow canyon. The walls rose high, offering cover. This would be the battleground. As the mercenaries approached, Runo stepped forward, his face twisted with anger and frustration. You cannot escape me this time, Darren. Hand her over. Darren stood firm. We will not. You've betrayed your own people once. You will not take her again. The first shots rang out, sparks flying against the canyon walls. But Darren and Nira moved as one. The silk flowed from her arms, wrapping around his rifle, his arms, and even the rocks around them. It hardened into shields, deflected attacks, and guided Darren's aim. Runo's soldiers rushed forward, but the silk struck them before they could reach the pair. Some were thrown aside, some tripped by threads that seemed alive, and others froze as if afraid to touch the glowing strands. Darren fired carefully, his aim true. The mercenaries stumbled back, not expecting resistance so strong. He realized that with Nira's silk and their bond, they were unstoppable. Runo himself lunged forward, determined to reach Nira. The silk leapt around her like a protective river, pushing him back. His anger was powerful, but it could not break the bond. You will not win, Runo. Nira shouted, her voice carrying across the canyon. Runo paused, his face filled with disbelief. This is impossible. The silk listens to our will, Darren said. And our will is strong. Together, they advanced. The silk wrapped around Runo's arms, pinning him without causing serious harm, holding him until the soldiers realized their leader was trapped. Panic spread. The remaining mercenaries dropped their weapons and fled into the desert, leaving their leader behind. Darren lowered his rifle and stepped forward. It's over, he said. Nira moved beside him, the silk glowing gently around both of them. She touched Runo's shoulder lightly. Leave this place. Never return. Runo's face twisted with rage, but he knew he was beaten. Without his men, he had no chance. Slowly, he retreated, disappearing into the desert. The wind swept across the canyon, carrying away the echoes of battle. Darren exhaled, the tension leaving his body. For the first time in days, he felt safe. Nira's silk dimmed, settling around her like a warm cloak. She looked at Darren, her eyes soft. The bond has protected us. And it will continue to do so, as long as we stand together. Darren smiled, feeling the truth in her words. I won't let anything happen to you. Not now, not ever. Nira's smile matched his, quiet but full of trust. And I will protect you too, she said. The knights in silk are more than tradition. They are a promise. Together, they climbed the ridge to watch the sun fully rise over the desert. The sky turned pink and gold, the sand sparkling like scattered diamonds. The world was wide, beautiful, and dangerous, but for the first time, Darren and Nira felt ready to face it together. Above them, the stars faded, but the memory of their glow remained in the silk. The bond was real, strong, and alive, a promise that neither mercenary nor shadow could break. Darren placed his hand gently over hers. We survived the night, Nira. And we'll survive the next one too. Together. She nodded, the silk around them glowing faintly in the morning light. Together, she repeated. The desert stretched endlessly before them, but for the first time, it felt like home. The nights in silk had ended, but a new journey was beginning. One of trust, courage, and unbreakable bonds. The horizon glimmered with possibility, and the two of them, human and alien, stood side by side ready to face whatever the stars held.